Before we start, I want to say that what I'm about to tell you isn't a story I'm proud of, not all of it anyway. It's a story about family, about legacy, and about how sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the loudest truth. It's a story about how my family saw me as a keeper of relics, a dusty hobbyist, while they built an empire on a foundation of sand. And it's about the moment I decided to kick the whole thing over. So get comfortable, because this is the story of how my little hobby didn't just change my life, it ended a dynasty. My name is Grace, and for as long as I can remember, I was the family's designated historian. It sounds quaint, doesn't it? Almost noble. But in my family, it was a title given with a pat on the head, a role designed to keep me busy and out of the way. While my brother Sam was being fitted for his first tiny suit at the age of 6, I was being handed my great-grandmother's photo albums. While he was learning about stock portfolios at the dinner table, I was learning the delicate art of preserving brittle yellowed paper. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, called it my passion, my little hobby. It was a convenient label for the daughter who was too quiet, too studious, and frankly too unlike them to fit into the grand, glossy picture of the Sterling family. The Sterlings were about the future, about growth, about the next big deal. I was about the past. They saw it as a harmless eccentricity, like a fondness for collecting stamps or building ships in a bottle. They never once considered that the past could have teeth. Our family firm, Sterling Investments, was the sun around which our entire lives orbited. It was a formidable presence in our coastal Connecticut town, a place where old money was as thick and quiet as the morning fog rolling in off the Sound. The firm's headquarters was a sleek, imposing tower of glass and steel that starkly contrasted with the colonial-era architecture of the town, a monument to my father's ambition, and as I would learn, my great-grandfather's sin. Sam was born to inherit that tower. From his first steps, he was told it was his kingdom. He had the right jawline, the easy charisma, the casual arrogance that our father mistook for leadership potential. He was the golden child, and I was the archivist, the keeper of forgotten things. I didn't mind it. Not really. I found a strange comfort in the silence of the past, in the faded ink of letters and the stoic, unsmiling faces and sepia-toned photographs. They were more honest than the practiced smiles at our family gatherings. My domain was the attic of our sprawling family home, a place that smelled of cedar, dust, and time itself. It was filled with trunks and boxes, a carefully cataloged library of our family's life. My parents were proud of it in a detached sort of way. They'd show it to guests on a tour of the house, saying, "And this is Grace's project. She's pieced together our entire family tree back to the 1700s. They'd smile, the guests would offer polite murmurs of admiration, and then they'd all go downstairs to drink my father's expensive scotch and talk about money, leaving me alone with the ghosts. I was a novelty, a living, breathing display in the family museum. My work was an accessory to their legacy, not a part of it. This dynamic, this stark division of roles was never questioned. It was simply the way things were. Sam would go to Wharton. I would go to a small liberal arts college for a history degree. Sam would get a corner office as a summer intern. I would get a grant to study archival preservation techniques. When he made his first $1 million deal, my mother threw a lavish party with a string quartet and served her signature duck à l'orange. When my thesis on 19th century maritime trade records was published in a respected historical journal, she told me, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Did you hear Sam's thinking of buying a boat?" He was the golden child, and I was the ghost. I haunted the edges of their lives, organizing their memories while they were busy making them. And for a long time I accepted it. It's a strange thing, the power of family expectation. You can spend your whole life in a box someone else built for you, and not even realize it's a cage until the door slams shut. For me, that slam came on a Tuesday, a cold gray afternoon in a lawyer's stuffy office, the air thick with the scent of old paper and unbrewed coffee. My father, Richard, had passed away 6 weeks earlier after a sudden illness. His death had ripped a hole in the fabric of our family, leaving a silence at the head of the dinner table that no amount of forced conversation could fill. We were all still reeling, adrift in the first stage of grief. I was there with my mother, Eleanor, and my brother Sam. My mother was a pillar of tragic grace, dressed in black silk, her face a carefully composed mask of sorrow. Sam sat beside her, looking less like a grieving son, and more like a man waiting for his coronation. The lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, a man who had known our family for decades, cleared his throat. He read through the initial bequests, the house to my mother, various trusts, charitable donations. Then he got to the heart of the matter, Sterling Investments. He paused, looking over his spectacles at Sam, and then, almost as an afterthought, at me. And regarding the controlling shares and chairmanship of Sterling Investments, he read, his voice monotone, I bequeath them in their entirety to my son Samuel Sterling. He paused again, and then delivered the final fatal blow. It is my firm belief that Sam is and has always been the one better suited for business. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp as shards of glass. Am better suited for business. It wasn't just a legal statement, it was a final, posthumous judgment. It was every dismissive pat on the head, every overlooked achievement, every that's nice, dear, condensed into one brutal, legally binding sentence. My father from beyond the grave was telling me what he'd told me my whole life. You are not enough. You do not belong here. This world is for your brother. I felt the blood drain from my face. I could feel my mother's hand gently squeeze Sam's arm in a gesture of proud confirmation. She didn't even look at me. Sam, for his part, simply nodded, a somber, self-important expression on his face, as if he were accepting a heavy but righteous burden. He was playing the role of the reluctant king, and he was playing it perfectly. I looked at my own hands, resting in my lap. They were historian's hands, careful and patient, stained with a bit of archival ink on one cuticle. They knew how to handle fragile documents, how to coax stories from the silent past. They were not, apparently, the hands of a Sterling. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. The quiet acceptance I had cultivated for 30 years crumbled into bitter ash. I wasn't just hurt, I was profoundly, cosmically erased. My father hadn't just left me out of his will. He had written me out of his legacy, and as I sat there, invisible in that suffocatingly quiet room, I felt a new kind of silence descend upon me. It wasn't the peaceful silence of my archives. It was cold, it was hard, and it was the beginning of everything. The weeks that followed the reading of the will were a blur of hollow condolences and the suffocating performance of grief. My mother and Sam moved through the world as the designated mourners, the public face of the family's loss. I, on the other hand, retreated. The attic, once my sanctuary, now felt like the prison cell I had been assigned. I spent days up there, not working, just sitting amidst the silent witnesses of my family's history. Every photograph of my father felt like an accusation. Every letter he had written seemed to mock me with its elegant, decisive script. Was I overreacting? I asked myself that question 1,000 times. It's the question every family scapegoat is trained to ask. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe I was just a sentimental fool with a dusty hobby. Maybe Sam, with his easy confidence and expensive suits, really was better suited for that world. My mother would call, her voice a careful blend of concern and command. Grace, darling, you need to come out of that dusty attic. We're having a small dinner on Friday, just a few of Dad's oldest clients. It's important for Sam to show a strong, united front, a united front. I was to be a prop, the sorrowful sister standing dutifully behind the new king. The thought made my stomach clench. I'd politely decline, making excuses about not feeling well. The truth was, I felt sick at the thought of playing my part in their charade. The charade was over, at least it was for me. To distract myself from the gnawing emptiness, I threw myself into my work with a frantic energy. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just needed to occupy my hands, to lose myself in the tangible reality of the past. I decided to tackle a project I'd been putting off for years, digitizing the journals of my great-aunt Elspeth. Elspeth was my grandfather's sister, a woman I'd never met but felt a strange kinship with. She was the family's other black sheep. She never married, traveled the world as a journalist in the 1930s and 40s, a scandalous choice for a woman of her station, and was spoken of in hushed, vaguely disapproving tones. She was eccentric, difficult. She was, I suspected, a woman who had refused to stay in her box. Her journals were bound in faded, burgundy leather, the pages filled with her sharp, intelligent scrawl. I spent hours scanning each page, the hum of the machine a hypnotic counterpoint to the silence of the house. Most of it was what you'd expect: vivid descriptions of her travels through Europe before the war, sharp-witted observations on politics, poignant reflections on a love affair with a French painter. I was lost in her world, a world so much larger and more honest than my own. Then I found it. It was in her 1948 journal, tucked away in a section covering the year she had returned home to Connecticut to care for her ailing mother. The bulk of the entries from that year were mundane, filled with frustration at being trapped in the stultifying quiet of her childhood home. But one entry was different. It was written in a smaller, more cramped hand, the ink slightly blurred as if from a trembling pen, and it wasn't on a regular page. As I carefully turned a leaf, I felt a slight thickness. My heart gave a little skip. Using a pair of archival tweezers, I gently probed the inside seam of the binding. There it was, a single sheet of onion skin paper, folded into a tiny, tight square, and slipped into a slit she must have carefully cut in the leather spine. A secret. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. The paper was so thin it was almost translucent. The entry was dated October 12, 1948. "I cannot write this in the main book," it began. "To write it is to give it a reality I cannot bear, but to keep it locked in my head is a torment. Arthur is a monster. He is a thief in a gentleman's suit. He came to me tonight, flushed with whiskey and victory, crowing about his new venture, his sterling company. I asked him how he managed it, where the capital came from. Father left us comfortable, but not rich enough to build an investment firm from scratch. He laughed. He told me it was a stroke of genius. He said Linway was a fool, a trusting, naive fool." Linway. The name didn't ring a bell. I kept reading, my blood running cold. And Arthur was my great-grandfather. He and Mr. Chen had been partners for 2 years in a small import-export business. They were doing well. Chen had the connections in Shanghai. Arthur had the salesmanship here. Chen had just liquidated his family's assets in China, bringing the money here to escape the Civil War, a substantial sum. Arthur convinced him to pool all of it, every last dollar, for a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity he'd fabricated. He drew up false papers. He created a phantom company. Once the money was in a joint account, Arthur simply emptied it. He said he told Linway the investment had failed, that they were ruined. He said Chen, a proud man, was so devastated and shamed that he simply disappeared. Arthur thought he went back to China with nothing. He was too proud to go to the police and admit he'd been made a fool of. Arthur boasted. "And now I have a clean slate, a new firm with a new name." He toasted himself with my father's brandy. I looked at my brother, this man I grew up with, and I saw a stranger, a common criminal dressed in my father's clothes. God forgive us. The foundation of this family's new fortune is nothing but theft. It is rotten to the core. I read the entry 3 times, my world tilting on its axis. The sterling legacy, my father's pride and joy, Sam's birthright. It was all a lie, built on the ruin of a man named Linway Chen. Chen, the name echoed in my mind, a ghost from a half-forgotten newspaper article I'd skimmed just a few weeks ago. The business section. I scrambled from my chair, my hands numb, and ran downstairs to the study, where I kept stacks of recent papers for archival purposes. My fingers flew through the pages, a frantic search fueled by a dawning, terrifying sense of purpose. And there it was, an article about Sterling Investments. The headline was stark: Sterling Investments facing hostile takeover bid from Chen Equities. The room began to spin. Chen Equities. The article detailed the firm's aggressive strategy, led by its brilliant and ruthless CEO, Marcus Chen, a man known for his methodical, almost poetic dismantling of his targets. The article included a brief bio. Marcus Chen, grandson of the immigrant entrepreneur Linway Chen, who came to America in the 1940s. I collapsed into my father's cold leather armchair, the newspaper in one hand, the fragile, damning confession of my great-aunt in the other. The two pieces of paper, separated by more than 70 years, had just collided in my hands, creating an explosion that only I could hear. For 70 years our family had been living a lie, prospering on the ghost of another man's fortune. And now, the ghost had come back. He had a name, and he was standing at the gates of my brother's kingdom, ready to burn it to the ground. In that moment, the grief I felt for my father, for my family, was replaced by something else, a cold, hard clarity. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about the truth, a truth that had been hidden in a dusty attic, waiting for a historian to find it. And I suddenly knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, what I had to do. The quiet hobbyist was about to make some noise. The discovery of Elspeth's diary entry didn't bring me a sense of righteous power, not at first. It brought a wave of nausea so profound, I had to sit with my head between my knees for a full 10 minutes, the smell of old leather and lemon polish filling my senses. It was one thing to feel like an outcast in your own family. It was another thing entirely to discover that the institution you were cast out of was a sham, a monument to a crime. My whole life, I had been made to feel inadequate for not fitting into the sterling mold. But the mold itself was counterfeit. It was a dizzying, disorienting realization. The foundations of my world weren't just cracked. They had never existed at all. For 2 days I did nothing. I locked the diary and the newspaper clipping in my fireproof document box, and tried to pretend I hadn't found them. I tried to go back to my digitizing, to lose myself in the mundane rhythm of work. But the words from Elspeth's diary were seared into my brain, a thief in a gentleman's suit. Every time I looked at a photograph of my great-grandfather, a stern, proud-looking man with my father's eyes, all I could see was a common crook. Every time I thought of Sam, preening in his new role as chairman, I felt a surge of something dark and bitter. He was king of a castle built on stolen ground. This is where the debatable character logic comes in, I suppose. The sane, rational thing to do would have been to bury the secret, to burn the page and forget I ever saw it. What good could come from unearthing a 70-year-old crime? It would destroy my mother, humiliate my brother, and tarnish a family name that, despite everything, was still mine. It was the ultimate act of familial betrayal. But then I would remember the lawyer's office, the condescending pity in Mr. Abernathy's eyes, my mother's proud squeeze of Sam's arm, and my father's final, damning words, better suited for business. It wasn't about revenge until it was. The thought began as a whisper and grew into a roar in the silence of my mind. They had built their world on a lie, and they had used that world to diminish me, to define me as less than. The injustice of it was a physical weight, a constant pressure behind my eyes. I needed to talk to someone, not my mother, certainly not Sam. I needed an outsider. I needed my voice of reason. I called Clara. Clara and I had been best friends since college, where we'd bonded over a shared love for obscure historical texts and a shared disdain for the business majors who dominated the campus. She was now a litigator for a public interest law firm in New York, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who could spot a lie from a mile away. I met her at a quiet coffee shop halfway between her city and my town. I'd brought copies. I never ever let original documents leave the archive. I slid the envelope across the table.
"You need to read this," I said,
my voice barely a whisper. "And you need to tell me if I'm insane." She read the copy of the diary entry first, her eyebrows slowly climbing her forehead. Then she read the article about Marcus Chen. She placed them both carefully on the table, took a long sip of her latte, and looked at me. Her expression wasn't one of shock or pity. It was one of grim validation. "Well," she said, her voice flat, "that's a hell of a thing. Am I crazy for thinking of doing something with this?" I asked, the words tumbling out. "It's from 1948, Clara. It's ancient history, but he's right there, in the paper. The grandson, and Sam. Sam is running the firm into the ground. I hear things. Dad's old colleagues call me, discreetly. They're worried. Sam is arrogant. He's making reckless trades. He's alienating clients. He thinks he's a genius, but he's just a child playing with a loaded gun. Chen's takeover isn't just hostile. It's probably inevitable. Clara leaned forward. Grace, let's be very clear. This isn't just ancient history. This is the origin story of a fraud. Legally, the statute of limitations on the theft itself ran out decades ago. But a hostile takeover isn't a court of law. It's a battle for narrative. And you, my dear friend, are holding the original script. She tapped the copied diary page. The question is, what do you want to happen? What did I want? The question hung in the air between us. I wanted my father to have seen me. I wanted my mother to have stood up for me. I wanted my brother to have an ounce of the humility I was forced to have a surplus of. But all of that was impossible. So what was the next best thing? I want them to know the truth, I said, my voice hardening. I want them to understand that the legacy they're so proud of, the one they use to measure my worth, is a lie. It was a debatable moral proportionality in the making. Was I about to destroy my family to soothe my own wounded pride? Maybe. But it felt more righteous than that. It felt like balancing the scales. Okay, Clara said, her lawyer brain kicking in. If you're going to do this, you can't go in half-cocked. A diary entry, even one as specific as this, is just a story. It's powerful, but a man like Marcus Chen will need more. He's a businessman, not a historian. You need corroboration. You need to use that big, beautiful brain of yours and your so-called hobby to build a case. Her words were like a splash of cold water. She was right. This couldn't be an emotional outburst. It had to be a methodical, undeniable, historical argument. It had to be a project. My project. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of my old self, the focused, determined researcher. My purpose returned, but this time it was weaponized. The next 4 weeks were a fever dream of research. I lived in the county records office, the public library's microfiche department, and the depths of online genealogical databases. My historian skills, once a source of gentle mockery, became my arsenal. I started with my great-grandfather, Arthur Sterling. I pulled the original incorporation documents for Sterling Investments from 1948. The capital declaration was a tidy, suspiciously round number. There was no mention of a partner. Then, I dug deeper. I searched for any business registered to him before 1948, and I found it. A defunct company, registered in 1946. Sterling Chen Imports. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was real. It wasn't just in Elspeth's diary. It was in the public record. The documents showed 2 partners, Arthur Sterling and Linwei Chen. I found the dissolution papers, filed in late 1948. The reason cited was mutual agreement, but only one signature was on the document, my great-grandfather's. The space for Linwei Chen's signature was blank. According to a note from the clerk, Mr. Chen was unreachable, presumed to have left the country. It was the smoking gun. Arthur hadn't just stolen the money. He had forged the end of their partnership. He had erased Linwei Chen from the record. I kept digging. I spent a day scrolling through the archives of our local paper, the New Haven Chronicle, from 1948 to 1950. I was looking for anything, a mention of a lawsuit, a police report, anything. I found nothing about a crime. Arthur was right. Linwei had been too proud or too broken to go to the authorities. But I did find something else. A small notice in the society pages from January 1949. It mentioned the engagement of a local heiress to a Mr. Arthur Sterling, the promising founder of the new firm, Sterling Investments. He had used the stolen money to buy his way into society, to marry my great-grandmother, to launch the dynasty. The entire edifice, the wealth, the social standing, the family itself, was built on this single dirty act. The final piece of the puzzle was Marcus Chen himself. I needed to understand who I was dealing with. His company's website was sleek and corporate, but the About Us section had a page dedicated to their founder's story. It was a carefully crafted narrative of resilience. It told of his grandfather, Linwei, a brilliant entrepreneur, who came to America with dreams of building a business, only to be ruined by a duplicitous partner. It spoke of how Linwei, with what little he had left, started over, working menial jobs, and slowly rebuilding, instilling in his children and grandchildren a fierce determination and a core belief in honor. The story didn't name the partner. It was a source of private family shame, a ghost they lived with. But I knew the ghost's name. I assembled my findings into a slim black binder. It was no longer just a diary entry. It was a timeline, a collection of irrefutable primary source documents, the incorporation papers of Sterling Chen Imports, the dissolution paper with the missing signature, the incorporation of Sterling Investments just weeks later, the newspaper clippings, and at the front, a copy of Elspeth's confession, the emotional heart of the cold, hard case. While I was building my secret archive of truth, the world outside was shifting. The hostile takeover bid was becoming more aggressive. The financial news was peppered with stories about Sterling Investments' instability. Sam, in his infinite wisdom, was fighting back not with sound financial strategy, but with arrogant press releases and bluster. My mother called me constantly, her voice tight with panic. "Grace, you need to talk to your brother. He's under so much pressure. This man, this Chen, he's a vulture. Your father would have known how to handle him. But Sam, he's trying his best, is he?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Or is he just continuing Dad's legacy of arrogance? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "How can you say that? At a time like this, we're a family, Grace. We need to stick together. You're being so cold. It's not like you." "Oh, but it is," I thought. "It's the new me, the one you all created." The final straw came in the form of a text message from Sam. It was late at night, and I was staring at the finished binder on my desk. My phone buzzed. It was a long, rambling message, a mix of panic and his usual entitlement. It ended with a line that sealed his fate. "You know, I could really use your help, Grace. Not with business stuff, obviously.
But Mom is a mess.
Maybe you could, I don't know, organize a family dinner or something to boost morale. Play to your strengths. Play to my strengths. Organize a dinner party while his kingdom crumbled." That was all I was good for. The prop. The quiet hobbyist. The keeper of the family's comfort. I picked up the phone, but I didn't call my mother or Sam. I looked up the headquarters of Chen Equities in New York. I asked for the office of the CEO, Marcus Chen. I didn't expect to get through, but I had a script ready for his assistant. "My name is Grace Sterling," I said. Is my voice steady and clear? "I have some primary source documents regarding my family's historic business relationship with his grandfather, Linwei Chen. I believe he will find them highly relevant to his current business interests. I can be in New York tomorrow." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then a crisp, professional voice said, "Please hold for Mr. Chen." My heart stopped. It was happening. The past was no longer in the past. It was on the phone, and it was about to become the future. The meeting was set for the following afternoon, in his Manhattan office. I spent the morning feeling like a spy in my own life, dressing with more care than I had in years. I chose a simple dark gray dress, professional and severe. I put my hair up in a neat bun. I wanted to look like what I was, a serious, meticulous researcher, not a scorned daughter, not a vengeful sister. I was an archivist presenting her findings. The black binder felt heavy in my tote bag, a concentrated weight of 70 years of secrets. The Chen Equities office was the antithesis of Sterling Investments, where my father's firm was all dark wood, brass, and a kind of stuffy, old-money pomposity. Chen's was a study in minimalist power. White walls, light wood floors, vast expanses of glass, offering a god's-eye view of the city. It was clean, sharp, and unsentimental. It was the future. Marcus Chen was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with a lean, watchful intensity. He didn't look like a corporate raider. He looked like a chess grandmaster, someone who saw the whole board, 10 moves ahead. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply gestured to a chair opposite his vast, empty desk. His office was as sparse as a monk's cell. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice quiet but resonant. Your call was intriguing. You have my full attention. My hands were surprisingly steady as I took the binder from my bag and placed it on the desk between us. Mr. Chen, I began, my voice as calm as I could make it. I believe you are operating under a misconception. You think you are engaged in a hostile takeover of a rival firm. You are not. I paused, letting the statement hang in the air. You are reclaiming a stolen family asset. He raised a single skeptical eyebrow. He said nothing, his eyes fixed on my face, waiting. I opened the binder. I didn't start with the diary. I started with the facts. In 1946, my great-grandfather, Arthur Sterling, and your grandfather, Lin Wei Chen, founded a partnership called Sterling Chen Imports. Here are the incorporation papers. I slid the first clear-sleeved page across the desk. He looked at it, his expression unreadable. For 2 years they were partners. By all accounts, your grandfather was the primary capital investor. In late 1948, the partnership was dissolved. Here is the dissolution paper. I slid the next page over. As you can see, it requires both partners' signatures for a mutual dissolution. Your grandfather's signature is absent. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. He was leaning forward now. 6 weeks after Sterling Chen Imports was officially dissolved, my great-grandfather, now the sole owner of its liquidated assets, founded a new company, Sterling Investments. I slid over the third document. He used your grandfather's money as the seed capital for my family's entire fortune. Finally, I pushed the last document across the desk, the copy of Elspeth's diary entry. And this, I said softly, is the confession. From my great-aunt, Arthur Sterling's sister, written the night he boasted to her about how he did it. Marcus Chen spent the next 15 minutes in complete silence, reading. He read every page, his eyes scanning the documents with an unnerving stillness. He lingered on Elspeth's words, reading them twice. The only sound in the vast, silent office was the faint whisper of him turning the pages. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, and waited. I had presented my case. The historian had rested. When he finally looked up, his face was a mask of cold fury. It was a terrifying, controlled rage, all the more potent for its silence. My father told me stories, he said, his voice a low growl. He said my grandfather never spoke the man's name. He called him the ghost, the man who stole his future. He said my grandfather died believing he had failed, that his own foolishness had ruined him. He looked from the documents back to me, and all this time, the proof was sitting in an attic. Yes, I said. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving mine. This is a remarkable piece of research, Miss Sterling, but I have to ask, why? Why bring this to me? This destroys your family, your name, your inheritance, what little of it there might be. Here it was, the moment of truth, my own motives, laid bare. It wasn't about money, I knew that, and it wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, but a very specific, personal kind of justice. It was the debatable moral proportionality of my actions. My father's will named my brother as his sole successor because he was better suited for business, as I said, the words tasting like acid. My entire life, I have been the family historian, a quaint title for the daughter who didn't fit. My work, my skills were treated as a cute, meaningless hobby. I tapped the binder. My brother is running your grandfather's legacy, and my great-grandfather's crime into the ground. He's an arrogant fool who was handed a kingdom he didn't earn and doesn't know how to rule. You are going to take that firm from him, that is a certainty. I'm not here to help you do it. He looked confused. Then why are you here? I am here, I said, leaning forward, my voice dropping, to give you the reason why. When the financial world asks why Chen Equities was so relentless, so determined to acquire a floundering mid-level firm like Sterling Investments, you will have an answer that has nothing to do with share prices or market consolidation. You will tell them the truth. You will tell them that you were taking back what was stolen from your family. I want the story to be told. I want the foundation of Sterling Investments to be exposed for what it is. I want my family's legacy to be corrected. I looked him straight in the eye. I don't want a finder's fee, Mr. Chen. I don't want a job. I want you to burn their world down, and I want you to use the truth as your fuel. A long silence stretched between us. He stared at me, and I saw a dawning, terrible respect in his eyes. He was seeing me not as a Sterling, but as a weapon, his weapon. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. Miss Sterling, he said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. I believe we have an understanding. I left his office and walked out into the cold New York air, feeling strangely light. The silent takeover was no longer just silent. It now had a voice, and it was going to speak my language, the language of history. The first tremor hit 3 days later. It came in the form of an amendment to Chen Equity's official takeover filing. It was a dry legal document, but it contained a new explosive addendum, a historical claim addendum that referenced a prior business relationship between the founders of both companies and unresolved financial discrepancies from their dissolution. It didn't lay out the whole story, but it planted a seed of doubt, a public-facing question mark, over the very origins of Sterling Investments. It was a warning shot, and I knew exactly who had fired it. The phone call from Sam came an hour after the news broke on the financial wires. His voice was a frantic, high-pitched squeak. Grace, what the hell is going on? Did you see this? What is this historical claim crap? It makes no sense, doesn't it? I said calmly, sipping a cup of tea in the quiet of my attic. No, it doesn't. It's insane. Our lawyers are scrambling. It's a fabrication, a tactic to spook the board. But where would he even get an idea like that? A prior business relationship. Great-granddad started the firm from nothing. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. The family myth, repeated so often it had become gospel. I let the silence hang for a moment. Are you sure about that, Sam? What do you mean, am I sure? Of course I'm sure. Dad told me the story 100 times. He was shouting now, his arrogance curdling into panic. This is a nightmare. The board is getting nervous. Our stock is dropping. This Chen guy is playing dirty. He's trying to imply something. What did you do? The accusation was immediate. It was always my fault. If anything went wrong in the perfect Sterling world, the first place they looked was at the family's sole imperfection, me. What makes you think I did anything? I asked, my voice still infuriatingly serene. Because you're the historian. You're the only one who even looks at that old junk. Did you talk to someone? Did you say something? You have to fix this, Grace. You have to put out a statement saying this is a lie. I felt a laugh bubble up, a genuine, startling laugh. It was the first time I'd laughed in months. Fix it. Sam, you're the chairman. You're the one who's better suited for business. Why don't you fix it? I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from exhilaration. The family's noise had begun, the panic, the demands, the accusations, and I was sitting in my fortress of silences, watching the storm I had unleashed. A few days later, a package arrived for me. It was from Marcus Chen's office. Inside, there was no note, just a single, state-of-the-art archival document scanner, the kind I had dreamed of owning for years. It was a clear, unspoken message. Keep digging. And so I did. Armed with my new tool, I began to scan everything, not just Elspeth's journals, but my great-grandfather's ledgers, old letters, everything. I was looking for more texture, more detail. I found letters from Arthur to my great-grandmother during their courtship, where he vaguely referred to a stroke of good fortune that had allowed him to finally make something of himself. He was spinning the lie from the very beginning. The lie was not just the foundation of the firm, it was the foundation of our family. Meanwhile, the pressure on Sam was becoming unbearable. Marcus Chen was a master of corporate warfare. He didn't just attack the numbers, he attacked the narrative. He leaked vague, tantalizing details to friendly financial journalists. Whispers of a founding scandal and unsettling new documents began to circulate. The story was too juicy to ignore. The ruthless corporate raider wasn't just after money. He was on a quest for filial justice. It was a story straight out of a movie, and the press loved it. Sam was completely out of his depth. He was a salesman, a schmoozer. He knew how to make a flashy presentation and charm a potential client over a 3-martini lunch. He had no idea how to fight a war of information, especially when the information was true. His public statements became more and more erratic. He called Chen a liar, a bottom feeder, a man with no honor. Each outburst only made him look more desperate and guilty. Then came the call from my mother. Her voice was thin, frayed, a silken rope stretched to its breaking point. "Grace, Samuel is coming apart. He hasn't slept in days. You have to stop this." "Stop what, Mother? I haven't done anything." It was a lie, of course, but it was their language. Plausible deniability. "Don't play games with me," she hissed, the pretense of politeness gone. "I know you. I know that resentful silence you carry around. You've been bitter since the will was read. You're jealous of your brother. You've done something to hurt him. You went to this Chen man, didn't you?" "Sam was handed a legacy," I said, my voice cold. "If he can't manage it, that's not my fault. His legacy. It's your legacy too. It's this family's legacy. Your father and your great-grandfather worked their fingers to the bone to build that firm, to give you and Sam the life you've had, and you're throwing it all away, out of petty spite." Worked their fingers to the bone. Another line from the family gospel. It was all I could do not to scream the truth down the phone line. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was silence. My silence, and Marcus Chen's noise. "I have to go, Mother," I said. "I have work to do." The climax of the antagonist panic came a week later. Sam, in a move of stunning desperation, had called for an emergency board meeting, planning to use his father's old allies to try and force through a poison pill strategy that would make the company prohibitively expensive to acquire. It was a scorched earth tactic, and a deeply stupid one. The night before the meeting, Marcus Chen made his final move. He didn't leak it to the press. He sent a single sealed envelope via courier to each member of the Sterling Investments Board of Directors at their home addresses. I knew what was in those envelopes. It was my binder, a perfect, undeniable copy of the entire case, the partnership papers, the forged dissolution, the newspaper clippings, and Elspeth's damning, heartbreaking confession. I could only imagine the scene. Board members in their quiet, suburban mansions, sitting in their studies after dinner, opening an unexpected package from their corporate enemy. They would have read it, the color draining from their faces. These were men and women of the old money establishment. They prized reputation above all else. The thought of being associated with a firm founded on such a sordid, public-facing crime would be anathema to them. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the stench of scandal. Sam's phone call that night was not a squeak. It was a roar of pure primal terror. "They all have it," he screamed into the phone, so loudly I had to hold it away from my ear. "They all have the binder. Where did he get it, Grace? Where? It has copies of Great Aunt Elspeth's diary. No one has seen that diary but you. This is you. You did this. You gave our family's history to the enemy." "I didn't give him anything that wasn't his," I said. It was a cryptic, unsatisfying answer, and I relished it. "You've destroyed us. You've destroyed everything. The board meeting tomorrow, they're not going to support me. They're going to crucify me. They're going to hand the keys to Chen just to make the scandal go away. Dad's company, it's over, because of you." He was sobbing now. Great, heaving, ugly sobs. The golden child, the king of the castle, was crying like a little boy who had just had his favorite toy taken away. I felt a pang of something, but it wasn't pity. It was a strange, hollow vindication. He wasn't crying because a 70-year-old injustice had been brought to light. He wasn't crying for the ruin of Linwei Chen. He was crying for himself. And in that moment, I knew I had been right. It was never about family honor. It was about their own selfish pride. The panic was complete. The foundation hadn't just been exposed, it had shattered, and the whole glittering tower was about to come crashing down. The ambush happened 2 days after Sam's disastrous board meeting. As predicted, they hadn't just rejected his poison pill strategy. They had demanded his immediate resignation as chairman. The vote of no confidence was unanimous. The press release was brutal and clinical, stating the board was now in direct and productive negotiation with Chen Equities to ensure a stable transition. It was over. The kingdom had fallen. My doorbell rang at 10 in the morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw them standing on my doorstep. My mother and Sam. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck. My mother's face was pale and drawn, her usual immaculate composure replaced by a tight, furious tension. Sam looked like he had aged 10 years. His expensive suit was rumpled, his eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot, and the confident swagger he'd carried his entire life was gone, replaced by a defeated slump. I opened the door. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice was flat, unwelcoming. "We need to talk," my mother said, pushing past me into the house. Sam followed her like a shadow. They stood in the middle of my living room, a space they had rarely entered, looking around at my bookshelves and stacks of archival boxes as if they were alien artifacts. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, closing the door but not moving from my spot. I would not invite them to sit. I would not offer them coffee. I was not the family hostess anymore. "Nothing to talk about," my mother shrieked, her voice cracking. "Grace, you have single-handedly destroyed this family. You have taken your father's life's work, your great-grandfather's life's work, and handed it to a stranger out of pure, venomous jealousy." "Jealousy," I repeated, the word tasting absurd. "You think this is about jealousy?" I was erased, Mother. Dad's will wasn't just a legal document. It was a final declaration that I meant nothing, that my life, my work, my entire existence was a footnote to Sam's. "You're being overly sensitive, as usual," she snapped, falling back on her favorite line of attack. "Your father did what he thought was best for the business, a business you have now ruined." Sam, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was a hoarse whisper. "It was a family secret, Grace. You keep family secrets. You don't publish them." I laughed. A cold, sharp sound that made them both flinch. "Publish them?" "I didn't publish anything, Sam. I gave a man back his own family's history. A history our family stole from him along with his money. Or did you miss that part of the story? This was the family exodus, I realized. Not other relatives leaving, but my own exodus from their twisted definition of family. My final, irrevocable departure. It was a different time. My mother stammered, her argument weakening. Business was done differently. Your great-grandfather was a strong man, a survivor. He did what he had to do to build a life for us, for all of us. He was a thief, Mother, I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense calm that was more unnerving than shouting. He was a common thief who stole another man's entire future and used it to cosplay as a gentleman. And you all built a temple on top of his crime and worshipped him for it. You worshipped the lie. I looked directly at Sam. You were groomed to be a businessman, but they forgot to teach you about consequences. You thought the name Sterling was a shield, but it's not. It's a brand, and the brand is now fraud. Sam visibly recoiled as if I had slapped him. My mother stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The counter-manipulation had failed. The guilt trips, the accusations of jealousy, the appeals to a fraudulent family honor, they were all bouncing off the new, hard surface of my resolve. They had no power over me anymore. "What do you want from us, Grace?" Sam asked, his voice cracking with desperation. "Is there money? Is that it? Do you want Chen to give you a payout? We can talk to him. We can arrange." "I don't want money," I cut him off. "I don't want anything from you. That's the part you'll never understand. This was never about getting something. It was about ending something." My mother finally found her voice again, and it was filled with a pleading, desperate venom. "Your father would be so ashamed of you." It was her last bullet, the one she'd been saving. For my entire life, that sentence would have shattered me. But now, it glanced off me without leaving a mark. No, I said, my voice soft but firm. Dad would be ashamed of the truth coming out. There's a difference. He was ashamed of the truth his entire life. That's why he built such a fortress of lies around it. I took a step toward them, and for the first time, I saw them both flinch away from me. The power shift was complete. The quiet hobbyist had become the most formidable person in the room. I think you should go, I said. It wasn't a request. My mother stared at me, her eyes filled with a horrifying mixture of hatred and dawning comprehension. She was finally seeing me, not as the pliable, quiet daughter, but as the architect of her ruin. She turned without another word and walked out the door. Sam hesitated, 1,000 broken questions in his eyes. He looked around my quiet, scholarly home, and I think for the very first time he understood that I had a life, a world completely separate from his, and it was a world he could not touch or control. He turned and followed our mother, a king without a kingdom, a man defined by a name that was now worthless. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, the silence of my home rushing back in to fill the space where their noise had been. It was finally, truly, quiet. The days that followed were a strange anticlimax. The official sale of Sterling Investments to Chen Equities was announced. It was a clean, swift transaction. The Sterling name was immediately scrubbed from the building, from the letterhead, from everything. It was as if it had never existed. Marcus Chen, true to his word, controlled the narrative perfectly. In a lengthy interview with the Wall Street Journal, he told the story. He didn't name me. He didn't mention a diary. He simply said that newly discovered historical documents had revealed the firm's true origins, and that his acquisition was not a corporate conquest, but an act of restoring a historical and familial balance. He was hailed as a new kind of CEO, one with a soul, a sense of history. He became a legend. My great-grandfather became a footnote of shame. I never spoke to Marcus Chen again. There was no need. Our transaction was complete. The new reality for my family was harsh and immediate. The Sterling name, once a key that opened every door in our town, was now a source of whispers and averted gazes. My mother, a woman whose entire identity was built on her social standing as Mrs. Richard Sterling, became a pariah. Her friends stopped calling. The invitations to charity galas and country club dinners dried up. She was forced to sell the sprawling family home, the one my father had been so proud of, and move into a small, soulless condominium. The duck-a-l'orange days were over. I heard from a cousin that she blamed me for everything, telling anyone who would listen that her bitter, jealous daughter had conspired to destroy their family. I imagine some people even believed her. Sam's fall was even more spectacular. He had no money of his own. His entire lifestyle had been funded by the firm. He was unemployed, disgraced, and unemployable. The name that was supposed to be his greatest asset was now his greatest liability. The last I heard, he was working in a junior sales role for a plastics company in a different state. Living in a small apartment, the golden child had been melted down for scrap. I saw them once, about a year later. I was in a bookstore downtown, and I saw them through the window, walking down the street. They looked small, diminished. My mother was clutching Sam's arm, not with pride, but as if for support. They were just two ordinary, unhappy people, stripped of the grand illusion they had wrapped themselves in. They didn't see me. I was as I had always been to them, invisible, and for the first time, I was grateful for it. My confrontation with them wasn't the one in my living room. The true confrontation was the life I built afterward. I took my father's inheritance, not the one in the will, but the one he'd inadvertently given me, a deep, abiding understanding of the power of the past. I took the money from the small trust fund he'd set up for me years ago, the one he probably saw as hobby money, and I started my own business. It's called Veritas Historical Research. I'm a consultant. I help people, law firms, and even corporations find the truth in the archives. I uncover lost deeds, verify provenances for art collectors, and piece together fractured family histories for people searching for their roots. My quaint hobby is now a thriving enterprise. I am respected. I am successful on my own terms. My name is my own, not a tarnished heirloom. My home is quiet, filled with books and the peaceful scent of old paper. It's a quiet that I have earned. The silence is no longer one of exclusion, it is one of peace. Was it revenge? I've asked myself that 1,000 times. Yes, of course it was. Let's not pretend otherwise. It wasn't about revenge until it was, but it was also about justice. It was about truth. It was about taking the one thing I was good at, the very thing my family dismissed, and using it to dismantle a world built on lies. They made me the keeper of their history, and I simply did my job. I presented the minutes from the last meeting, and the meeting was adjourned. Permanently, the Sterling family, as we knew it, was over, and a new reality, a truer one, had begun. My reality. So that's my story. It's messy, it's complicated, and I know some of you watching might think I went too far. Maybe you think family is family, no matter what. Maybe you think a 70-year-old secret should have stayed buried, and you're entitled to that opinion. There's a part of me that wonders if there was another way, a less destructive path. But then I remember that cold, stuffy lawyer's office, and the feeling of being utterly and completely erased. And I know I did the only thing I could do. I chose to exist. We all have a role we're assigned in our families. Have the responsible one, the wild one, the smart one, the pretty one. I was the quiet one, the keeper of memories. And I learned that memories aren't just gentle, faded things. They can be weapons. They can be keys. They can be the truth that sets you free, even if it means burning down the house you grew up in to do it. The question is, what do you do with the truth once you find it? Do you keep it silent, to keep the peace? Or do you let it speak, and live with the beautiful, terrifying, liberating noise it makes? I made my choice, and I sleep very, very well at night. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it was a long one. If you've ever felt like the odd one out in your own family, or if you've ever had to fight to have your own story heard, I hope this gave you a little bit of strength. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think I did the right thing, or did I go too far? I'm genuinely curious to hear your take, and if you have a story of your own, I'd be honored if you shared it. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and please subscribe for more stories about the complicated, messy, and sometimes maddening thing we call family.